All right, in this video, we're going to explain what this thing called board feet is all about. All right, so for instance, if I were to take a chunk of wood like this, really board feet would describe the volume of this particular block or wood. Okay, so for instance, see if you can see this on my screen here. So what you're looking at is a pile of wood. Okay, so much like I have in the wood shop, big pile of wood. So when I call the lumber yard, I ask for a volume of wood rather than many boards, right? So you can see all those boards stacked up, hundreds and hundreds of boards. So instead of ordering 300 individual boards, I say, hey, I need 1,500 board feet of material. Now, what type of wood do we use in our project? We actually use alder. Okay, so that is a valuable lesson in ordering materials from a lumberyard and then ultimately determining how many board feet of material do we use in our project. Okay, so again, going back to our board here, really it's just a volume. So if I look at this individual block here, I have really kind of three dimensions here. Okay, so I have the length that runs this way, and then I have the width, and then I have the thickness. Okay, so if we move on to understanding what board feet is all, we need to understand these terms. Okay, T, W, and L. When we make measurements with board feet, we are going to do that in inches. So you're going to see those symbols T, W, and L. All right, so take a look at this formula. Go ahead and write this down. All right, here's our formula. It has T tickness times W width times L length in inches, and we're going to divide that by 1 times 12 times 12. Okay, so that's our formula. So write that down. We need to have that for later. Now you probably recognize a volume calculation right here. All right, so since we have 3 dimensions, that measures volume. All right, so what you see here in this slide is 1 board feet. So what does 1 board feet look like? So if I had a board that has a dimensions of 12 inches by 12 inches by 1 inch thick, that would be 1 board feet. Okay, so there is our units. Sometimes I specify, I'm not terribly consistent about this. Sometimes I'll do BF for board feet or BDFT. So be aware of that. But nonetheless, that would be the equivalent of 1 board feet. So now we got to recognize that, hey, this measurement right here is in inches. We have another value in inches and another value in inches. Okay. However, our unit is in feet. All right, so we have to do a little bit of conversion. So if I go back to my formula, okay, right here, all right, so you notice that the denominator is 1 times 12 times 12. Those are the dimensions of T, W, and L in inches. Okay, so that's really our conversion to feet. There is a special note about the thickness, and only the thickness is that we have to do a special thing to. So we always round up, all right, to the nearest whole number. So why is that? Well, if we take a look at this stack of lumber that's on my computer screen, each one of those boards from the lumber yard starts out at 1 inch. Okay, so then when I order materials from the lumber yard, I tell them to surface 2 of the faces of each one of those boards so they get down to 3/4 and really smooth them out. So they start out as 1 inch, so that's why we have to round up. So even though we would work with material less than 1 inch, we still need to have our thickness as a whole number to the nearest whole number. So for instance, here's an example. If I move this in here. All right, if I had a board that has a 1.5 inches in thickness, okay, I would round up into the formula as a 2-inch thickness in my formula, okay? All right, so if we take a look at the notes I have here, just kind of summarize what we talked about so far, okay? And I want you to write this down as far as your notes, eventually take a picture of it and submit this, okay? All right, so nonetheless, here is our formula. All right, we took a look at that. Defining each of those units, thickness, width, and length in inches. And this special note about thickness. We want to round up to the nearest whole number. W and L, width and length, we use the measurements as is. We do not do anything special about W and L. All right, so go ahead and write those notes down on a piece of paper, much like you see here. All right, on Schoology, I'll have this worksheet for you to do. I will ask you to put this on a separate piece of paper, and we'll run through an example here as we progress, okay? So one thing I want you to note, though, if the thickness is not given to you, all right, assume that it is 1 inch, okay? All right, so I just put a little note down there, so make sure you incorporate that. Actually, that will be a good way to see if you watch this entire video. All right, so here's what I'd like you to do. All right, here is our number 1 problem. All right, I do want you to sketch it out much like you see here, so let's dedicate a page, all right, for number 1 here. All right, so if you take a look in the upper left-hand corner, I just went ahead and sketched that board. It happens to be oak, not that that's relevant right now for us, but it has a dimension of 6 inches and 30 inches, okay? All right, so the way this is gonna work out, here is a place to put our formula. All right, so T, W, and L. All right, so T, since it is not shown, we're going to put that as 1. W width is 6, and L is going to be 30. Okay, camera's having a tough time focusing. All right, so now I'm going to do the math on the numerator and denominator and place that in the next blank to the right. All right, so I really don't need a calculator for this, but certainly can use one. So here we have the number 1, all right? So in math, anytime that we multiply a number by 1, it ends up being itself. So really, we could just kind of skip that, right? So we really need to just take 6 times 30, okay? So that ends up being 180, and again that's going to be inches, and then 1 times 12 times 12 is 144. All right, so now when I do that fractional math, since my numerator is larger than my denominator, we can assume that our value is going to be greater than 1. Okay, I just kind of use my math filter, some logic reasoning to understand what kind of result I'm going to get right here. All right, I will need to use a calculator for that. All right, this is probably pretty fuzzy because of the sun behind me, but if I plug in my values here, so 180 divided by 144, and I should get a fraction of 1.25. So my result is 1.25, and my unit is board feet. Okay, so that would be number 1. Okay, that's on a separate page, and then of course here is my number 2. That's for you to do. So this is the format that I want you to follow. Okay, and then here is number 3, 4, 5. All right, what I'm going to ask you to do is to submit one file, one PDF, and on that PDF, on that file is going to be 6 images. Okay, so you're going to have to take photos. So here's my first one, my notes. Verify you took notes. And then, of course, what I just showed you, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So you're going to have 6 photos that I want you to put on a document. All right, so here's an example of the format that I want you to follow. Take a look at here. So on this document, use a Google Docs, Microsoft Word, and then eventually convert it to a PDF. You should know how to do that by now. And then here's my notes, number problem number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, and that's what you'll submit for today's assignment.